Good
Yeah.
afternoon, Lorna. How
Good
you doing? You well?
afternoon. I'm well. I'm good. You know, they say, are you good? You good?
Yeah, good, no, good, good. We're here to talk
Yeah.
about We Out Here, the exhibition, which at its purpose is showcasing the work of Black artists of Caribbean heritage based in Hastings. We run the story on our website. Did you catch that? Did you see my
Yeah.
headline, Lorna? Did
Yeah, I
you
did.
like it?
I
You
did.
want
I
Black
thought it was good.
artists? We out
Yeah.
here. You know what I mean? Talk to us. What's it all about?
Yeah. Because I think that's the thing. Because when I went to Hastings Contemporary, I was just checking. It was February last year. And I was saying to them, would you put on the show featuring, so at that time it was 7 Black artists, because it wasn't, when I spoke to them, I said, it wasn't even a thing about race. It was just about even Hastings. You're not even representing Hastings, but more specifically, because I've lived in Hastings nearly 17 years. And it's like, we're still waiting to be showcased. And so we had this conversation about, there's this back and forth, like, how could we make this happen? At first, they're a bit reticent, but I was just saying, like, people want to see people in the town, and you're very lucky to have, artists of very high caliber who happen to be Black, and the thing is, in the show, there's 6 Black artists, but I could have done this show maybe 3 times over. So it was that. So that was the beginning of it. So it was me approaching the gallery, because people just say, like, oh, it's so good that they're doing this. No, it's the approach,
What are the themes being? I know there's a load of them, and for those who are watching, it runs all the way up until June, so there's no excuse for you not to take something
No,
in
you've
from
got to
this
reach.
exhibition
Yeah,
to
you've
get
got to.
down there. But what are the themes that, and I don't expect you to cover them all, Lorna, but what are the
Well, I'm
ones that have
not.
resonated with you? What are the ones that have resonated with you the most so far?
Well, I have to give a bit of context. So it's like, so there's 6 artists in the show. So there's me, Lorna Hamilton-Brown. There's Richard Mark Rawlins. There's Eugene Palmer, Elaine Mullins, Maggie Scott. So I chose the artists that work in a similar way to me. So the way that I work is very research-based. I do a lot of research on my subject matter, and then my work goes into a lot of detail and a lot of what I would call, well, yeah, like there's craft in it, but it's just that element of skill and attention to detail. So I chose artists that work in the same way. So that was the starting point. And then we met every week. Even we didn't have no money. We had this, Hastings Contemporary said, we'll give you this slot. We had no money. We didn't know who was going to get money. So we had to commit without the money. And so it's through talking that themes came up. So one of the themes is, being Black and living at the coast, and that thing of like, wanting to be by the sea. And what's interesting as well is that Richard Rawlins, he's the only one in the group that was born in the Caribbean. So he's born in Trinidad. So his experience is different than the rest of us that are born here. So he was saying to me that he's just discovering like what it's like to be Black in Britain, because he had a different experience. He lived in a majority Black place. And he was saying that he read the Nelson's Reader, and they would learn everything about Britain, Eden, Blyton, Snow, everything before they learn about the Caribbean. So he's brought that into the show, that coming from that perspective. Another strand that's going through the show is the environment. So Maggie Scott's looking at fast fashion and the impact on the global north. Elaine Mullins is looking at the cost of, you want your mobile phone, you want your green, you want to be green, but there's a cost for people in Africa. So she's looking at, that's another strand. The Windrush is another strand that goes through there. So myself and Richard Rawlins, we've done work that responds to Angela Levy's Small Island and to Windrush. Eugene Palmer, he's an oil painter, so his work is about the coast. And then Paul Hope is a leather worker. So another strand that's going through We Out Here is that, because my main medium is knit, I wanted other people that were doing sort of non-traditional, what you associate being the gallery. So Paul, he's doing leather work. So he trained at the Courtwains and he had made saddles, but he hadn't really made any artworks in leather. It's all hand stitched. Maggie Scott, she does felting. She's known for her felting work. Elaine, she uses everyday materials as well. So these are the different strands that run through the work, and that we're all of a certain age as well. I'm 65. So, but we're all that kind of...
wearing it well, might I say.
I know, yeah. So we're all that kind of generation as well. So we're having similar conversations. So I think that's what makes it a tight show as well.
I appreciate you going into that detail. For those who want to find out more, do check out the links at the end of the story on the Voice website. Lorna, you're a recipient of an MBE. You're known as the Banksy of the knitting world for your use of the medium. For those who are coming across you for the first time, speak on a little bit how you found your lane in the art world.
Yeah, well, I came in pretty late, you know, because back in the day, so in the 80s and 90s, I used to design knitwear, children's wear. So I've sold in Harrods, I was on the clothes show, things like that. But I didn't know that knit could be a medium that you could use. I didn't even know that was a thing. And when I was 40, that's when I did my arts foundation. So prior to that, I was living on North Peckham Estate, and they did this thing where they would come around, and if you had no qualifications, which I didn't, you could do a mini foundation. So I did a mini foundation at Camberwell School of Art. And then the thing would be that after you've done this mini foundation, you would get a place on a full foundation. But at the time, my youngest son, it was about 3 months, I was going home breastfeeding. I was tired. And I said to the guy in the course, oh, I need to just sit down and draw. He was going, you've got to stand, you've got to draw with all your whole body. And I was just saying, I'm really tired, you know. So at the end of it, they offered me a place, but I didn't take it. And I remember him saying to me, you will never get this opportunity to study at such a prestigious place. And I was just like, I'm not bothered, you know what I mean? Because I just couldn't do it and have a young child. Then we moved off from North Peckham Estate to Leicester. And then when I went to Leicester, I did my foundation at 40 at Leicester College as it was then. And I went on from there. And although I had a textile background, I didn't do my degree in textiles. I did it in digital multimedia. So web design, games design. I got into a lot of performance and multimedia. So that was my thing then. And I got into more illustration. And I was still doing a little bit of knit on the side, but it was more illustration, more digital media. Then I went into lecturing at De Montfort University. And then in 2011, I was working at Ravensbourne College. And I just thought, you know what, I want to just go and do my art. And what I would caveat that with is I went to an arts group in Deptford, and there was a gallery there. And they were having this meeting, it was for people in art, but I couldn't really join in the conversation at that time. This is before I did the Arts Foundation, because I didn't know the artists that they were talking about. And they said, what do you want to do? And I said, I really want to be a full-time artist. And they said, 1, you're a woman, and 2, you're black, so you can't do it. So that always stuck in my mind. Wow. So, you know, and these things that people say. So yeah, 2011, I thought I want to just go and I want to try and do art just as a thing. And so I started off doing illustration, doing cards and things like that. And then I came across the work of Freddie Robbins, who is well known for using knit in art. And I just thought, oh, I could use my knit in art. So then I had that change and I started to incorporate my knitting using the medium of knit to create artworks. And that's where it started from. Then Lauren O'Farrell, she was one of the first people to do like graffiti knitting. When you saw this yarn bombing out, she had a group called Knit London, and then she reviewed me and called me the Banks of Knitting, and it started from there. And then things that I had done early on was, it's, you know, as I say to people, Black people are not a monolith. So I was brought up, lived in Lewisham. My mum and dad, they worked really hard. So I had a white nanny. So my life was very much how they grew up. So I would listen with mother, and in the evening I would listen to the Archers. For those that don't know, that's a program, a drama about farming people, and I still listen to it now. So it was a few years ago, they had a storyline in there about domestic violence, and I started to create art pieces about the storyline. Then the BBC got in touch with me and said, do you want to do another piece? And a lot of the time I'll put my work out in the street where people can see it. I'm not really worried about whether it's in the gallery. So yeah, it started from there. And then we fast forward to 2016, and I had a friend die, and I just thought, what do I really want to do? And I thought, I want to do a master's. I didn't even know what it was. And I want to go to the Royal College of Art, because I say to my children, if you're going to study somewhere, it's got to be top 5. So And then the head of the course there was Freddie Robbins, who does the knit. So I went to the Royal College, that was 2016, and I got my master's in 2018. And while I was there, I didn't really enjoy studying there, but that's for another program. Because I didn't enjoy it, I really put my time into my dissertation. So my dissertation was Myth Black People Don't Knit, the importance of art and oral history for documenting the experience of Black knitters. And why I did that dissertation, which is a seminal dissertation, it's been quoted in lots of books now because there's not a lot of research, is that I was at an academic knitting conference. So there are such things, you know, how many references to knitting, Agatha Christie, And I was saying the audience isn't very diverse. And this knitting academic said to me, that's because Black people don't knit. I was like, Kuya, what do you mean Black people don't knit? You know, so then I wrote this whole dissertation. And when I got to the end of it, I thought, you know what? Really, she's right. Because if you're, as an academic, they're coming from it that it's not in the books. So if you look in the books about the history of knitting, Black people are not mentioned. The book starts off, knitting started in Egypt. That's the first line. And then the rest of the book is in Europe. So we're not shown anywhere. So a big part of my work is about finding these hidden histories of Black people knitting. So, like, for example, I said to my mum comes from Jamaica. What did you knit with in Jamaica? You know? And then she said, we use coconut bone. I was like, what's that? So she goes, the middle of the coconut leaf is really hard. And we stripped that off and then we knit with that. But these things have never been documented. So it's like new knowledge. And then she said, then we use the bicycle spokes. So I could make the link to in Victorian times in Britain, people were knitting with bicycle spokes. So I said to her, so if you've got loads of coconut leaves, why don't you just knit with coconut bone? So she goes, well, you know, when not everybody can have the bicycle spoke. So then you're more posh if you have the bicycle spokes, you know? So, but these things, you know, in Jamaica, maybe people just know, but unless it's written down, for those people, it doesn't count. So
it's consigned to an oral history, right?
Yeah. So that's a lot.
Whoosh.
So there's the two strands of me wanted to uncover these hidden stories and then also using knit as a medium in my work. And the reason, and I think Maggie Scott, who has done the piece in the show, is that when you use textiles, you can draw people in because people associate it with comfort, with warmth. And then I would say you can link them with truth. That's what I would say.
We Mech knitted magazine cover, right?
Yeah.
The Windrush 75 issue. That's what's going to be featuring.
I've got two.
Okay.
So I'll just very quickly give you a bit of background on, because I've got two knitted magazines in the show. So We Mech. So, you know, I had to have a name. So for those of you who don't know the pattern, we make, but it's We Mech. And I think it was 2020 anyway, I called that the Crafts Council because it was just after George Floyd had got murdered. And not only did they put up a black square, that was like triggering, but they put on it, we're actively fighting and race. Our job is to fight racism. I think you're not doing it. So I called them out on Instagram because there was a lot of debate going on about the racism in craft. So people going into yarn shops and then the people following them around or being shown the cheaper yarn because they think you can't buy yarn. The fact that on knitting magazines or craft magazines in general at that time, you couldn't even see a black face. So, you know, this was it. So anyway, Dr. Karen Patel from Birmingham University was doing a lot of research about that. How do we tackle racism in craft? And then she commissioned 5 artists, me being one, to create a piece that speaks to that. And I was thinking, well, that's a big subject. How do I cover that? So then I thought the idea of a magazine cover would be an ideal vehicle to do that. So that was the first magazine cover. And as I said, I've done writing about the myth that Black people don't knit. So I knew that I wanted a Black woman knitting on the front of this magazine. And I wanted a big afro to talk about, you know, when we show in a magazine, the hair straightens. I wanted natural hair. So the figure is based on Angela Davis. So there is no picture of Angela Davis knitting. I had to create that. So, you know, my skills of using like Photoshop and illustration. So I created this character. And then I thought it'd be ironic to have a person knitting, wearing a knitted jumper on a knitted piece. So that was my first knitted magazine cover. And that's been on loan from the Crafts Council, because they're in the process of purchasing that piece. So that I already had that piece. So for this show, I thought I want to make a second knitted magazine cover. And as I said, there's strands going through the show. So Richard Rawlins has done a series of paintings called the West Indians, and that makes reference to Andrew Levy's Small Island. And on it says, men in scruffy coats wearing knitted scarves. And I was going to knit some scarves to go underneath his work, but I didn't have the time. So, you know, we were both at the Royal College of Art at the same time. So we had these conversations. So in relation to Andrew Levy, in her book Small Island, there's lots and lots of references to Hortense, the character, knitting. And as I've said, we're not in history books, so we need to look at a fictional book. So I was trying to get in touch with Angela Levy, but sadly she died. She passed away. But I did contact her husband, and he said that Hortense was based on her mother, and her mother was a prolific knitter. So her mother was really skilled at knitting. So there we can document that her mother had the skills in it. So it's not just fictional, it's a fact, you know. So I wanted to honor Angela Levy on the cover. So she's on the cover, and it says World War II knitting, and that's a reference to that knitting, and that her book is so important for that. And I have written about the knitting references in her book. Then also on there, so at the top on both magazines, it says probably the best crafts magazine in the world, which is reference to Carlsberg Lager, because if they say probably it's the best, then it is the best. You know what I mean? So on the other side of that, so you've got Angela with the afro, and it's black. I don't know why I chose black, because it's the hardest thing to knit. And then it's got red and white lettering. And why I've gone for that is that I think it was 2019, correct me if I'm wrong, September 2019, Vogue did the British activist cover with Marcus Rashford on it, and it was black with red and white lettering. So it's like showing that, because my work's always got symbolism in it, so that's the symbolism in there. And then on the other side, it's got take up the needle and sew the piece of cloth in patois. And then I'm looking at let's reclaim our language. And then it says Mrs. Brown, who's my mother. And my mother is a seamstress. She's 93. She still sews, but it's that fact that these women had so much skills and we didn't really acknowledge it. So when I was at the Royal College of Art, for example, the technician, she was another person who'd worked in factories, a white lady, yeah. And I was just thinking, she's good, but my mum even has more knowledge because she's worked on all different machines. But would my mum ever be able to have a job at the Royal College of Art as a technician? So I mean, and it's just like I started to think differently. Also, when my mum used to make things, she would never buy a commercial pattern. She could just see it and then cut it out on newspaper. And I said, oh, I don't want that. I want you to buy the pattern, you know? And it was Professor Carol Tulloch who started writing about that these West Indian women and English women as well, because you have no money, so you have to be versatile, could have that skill to look at something and make it. And she called it like freeform sewing. And it's like I had a name, and it's like, yeah, we need to value, you know. So it has various things on it. So, but I won't spoil it. You need to see it really to appreciate it.
No, I appreciate that. And again, full program details for the We Out Here exhibition are available on the Voices website. And it's already kicked off and ends in June. Lorna, when I was pulling my questions together, and you've kind of gone through a lot of the content already. Thank you for that. I wondered what challenges, if any, you had created the knitting magazine cover for We Out Here, and how did you overcome them? Also, I wanted to know, in terms of representation of the Windrush generation in contemporary art and media, you kind of started to touch on it already. But what do you hope your artwork will contribute to the representation through We Out Here and beyond?
Yeah. So the challenges that I had making the piece was that I was organising the exhibition, writing the Arts Council bid, and making the work. So then it became like a production, what we call a production knit, where it's just like, today you just need to knit 5 rows in this, you know. So the method of knitting, it's knitted on a knitting machine. It was a 6-month knit, and it's intarsia. So if you think of a knitting machine, you've got a row of needles, you've got 250 needles. they're 3.6 millimeters apart. So for every change of color, I have another strand of yarn. And so it's a very slow process. So Pringle jumpers still use that method. It's quite an old method and it's slow. And so you go along the row. So it's slow. And as I said, the main color was black. So, you know, I'm 65. So it's like, I think even for younger people, you know, just to see the black and the detail. And then I'd got halfway up and I dropped about 20 stitches. And it's just like, what do you do? You can't, there's no unravel, do again. You've got to carry on. So I had to pick up those stitches. So it's those challenges. And it's like running a marathon, really. And also the fact that when you get near to the end, don't rush, because that's when the most mistakes happen. It's just being really, really steady. And then once it's knitted, there's loads of ends on the back that have to be hooked up. So it's like you finish the work and then you might have another 2 months just to finish it off. So those were the challenges. And also another challenge I would say is that when you're knitting, it's distorted. So you have to get the right tension. And, you know, you do a tension square beforehand, but you never know if it's going to be quite right. So when it comes off the machine, you know, you're just crossing your fingers and hoping that it's the right proportion, but it was. But I was just like, you know, but I've just got a card here to show you. Look. That's the first magazine.
Oh, nice. Oh, thank you. You did that. Yeah, I was gonna. Yeah, no.
I did cards. Do your merch.
You got to do your merch, mate.
You got to get
the dough rolling in.
So I think in terms of the Windrush generation, which my parents are, I'd like to a younger generation to see different images. So it's not just them coming off of the boat, but different ways that we can represent. And, you know, looking at Angela Levy, she's of that her parents of that generation. So it's like, for me, it's more us looking at where the first generation of our parents' children, and what's our experience? How do we look back? So it's Rose Sinclair, who does a lot of work on craft and a lot of work about the Dog Society. She wrote a very interesting piece. And it's like looking back to look forward. So we're looking back, but we're also looking forward. So it isn't just this case of we're always looking back to the boat. We're looking forward as well. And I think that's really important, especially for me. I've never been to Jamaica and I'm born here. That's really bad, isn't it?
No comment. Get there before
I know. I need to get there
before you can.
I know.
I wanted to kind of close it off there, but before I do, how did you feel when you got the MBE? How was that for you?
Yes, I got that 2004. The thing is, like 2004, you never really know who nominates you. So, you know, get this letter come through the letterbox, and then I rang up the number and I was like, oh, I just want to check if this is legit. And I go, you should just be grateful that you've been nominated. And I'm thinking, well, who gets it coming through their letterbox? Because I didn't know anybody at that time. So the dilemma that I had was that other people got it at the same time and was turning their MBs down. And people go, you're going to turn yours down. But then for me, I think it's a personal thing. So for me, it's going to mean a lot to my mother, the people who nominate me that I don't know. So I wanted to take it, you know. So it hasn't changed my life. I haven't been invited to a garden party yet, but it's really good you can sign people's passports and it's really good for doing CVs. But yeah.
Interesting.
It's one of those. It's one of those, but I think it's acknowledging what it does mean. So I did acknowledge that as well. But I think as well, for my mum was just made up to go to Buckingham Palace. She was just like, you know, and the sacrifices that they made. So that was important to me.
Lorna Hamilton-Brown, really appreciate your time. We out here.
Thank you.
For, you know, it's important to highlight people doing important work, and you've already shared with us that there was no money in the beginning, but I bet there's a load of people buying into the vision now. So I hope it's the first of many, and you get to do it again next year, and it gets easier as the years go by.
Can I add something else as well? What's important is that it's not important, but we're not in London, we're in Hastings. So it's like we have the spotlight in London, but there's lots of us that have moved out of London. So I think it's important that we get that exposure as well. So come and visit. It's a nice day out.